This hangout is now live. Welcome to everyone. This is the final virtual connecting from Open Education Conference in Vancouver. We'll start with the physical on-site folks first, and then the virtual participants.
Okay. Hi, I'm Amy Collier. I am Associate Provost for Digital Learning at Middlebury College.
And I'm Laura Govia. I'm the Graduate Fellow at Academic Learning Transformation Lab at Virginia Commonwealth University, Richmond, Virginia.
My name's Viv Rolfe. I'm from Bristol in England. I produce science, open education resources, and do some research around stuff as well.
I'm Mandy, Honeyman, and I'm hosting, so I'm going to disappear out off camera in a minute. And I was with the Open University. I've now moved to the USA, and I'm trying to find interesting stuff to do. So that's why I'm here.
Hello, I'm Jen Ross. I am part of the Digital Education Research Centre at the University of Edinburgh.
Hi, I'm Jennifer England. I'm a PhD student at the University of Minnesota and an academic technologist. And we're going to have one more person joining us as well, just in time to introduce yourself.
Hi, Tom Evans, Ohio State University, instructional designer, among other things.
Hi. I think and Alan is present in the background as well, so we'll say hi to Alan.
I'm eating pad thai.
Really good. It's really unfair that this is happening.
Sorry.
I am speaking on behalf of Virtually Connecting. My name's Helen DeWard, and I'm in Central Ontario and a V-Connecting addict at this point. Time shifting from coast to coast to countries, different continents. So it's nice to connect with all of you there. So we'll go through the other virtual participants. We'll start with Vivian. Oh, Penny.
Hi everyone, I'm Penny Bentley from Melbourne, Australia. I'm a PhD student looking into open educational practices for K-12 teachers. So it's great to be here today. Listen to the chat.
And
Mary.
Hi everyone, I'm Mary Loftus and I work at NUI Galway. Just started my PhD studies, so I'm a newbie at that and I'm a newbie at V-Connecting, so looking forward to it.
And I'm Maha. I'm in Cairo, Egypt, and I'm the co-founder of Virtually Connecting. Kristen, do you want to go next?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Kristen Eshelman. I'm Director of Digital Learning Research and Design, R&D, at Davidson College, and I'm really hating that I'm not at Open Ed. It looks like an amazing conference.
Okay, let's turn it over to the on-site folks and give us some updates, give us some info. Let's have a chat.
Well, the way that we've done this in the past, and I guess it would be a good starting point, is to talk a little bit about some of the themes that have emerged, particularly today around the conversations we've been having. I think Jen and I could talk a little bit about the talk that we just gave, if that's interesting or fun. So I don't know, Jen, do you want to tell them a little bit about what we talked about?
Yeah, well, we decided that what we really wanted to do was explore a concept that we've been working on in other contexts, in the context of openness and open educational resources. So we talked today about the concept of not-yetness, which is the way that we've been trying to think about mess and complexity in online distance digital education, and tried to think about some of the frameworks and questions we could use to apply not-yetness to openness and open educational resources. So that was what we spent our 20 minutes doing, and it was really, for us, really interesting to try to make those connections in this slightly different but obviously related context, to dive into some of the critical literature on openness and try to figure out where we might be able to make a contribution. So that was what we did, and it was quite fun.
I think one of the fruitful metaphors that we ended up working with is the notion of the borderlands and borders, and how a lot of times it's really easy to kind of, or not easy, but it's often the case that we separate people into camps. We separate work into camps of this is that and this is not that, or this is good, this is bad, this is whatever it is, open, closed, open, broken. And what we tried to do with our not-yetness talk is to kind of highlight the opportunity to think about what are these borders that are in some ways separating falsely or creating these boundaries between things that maybe don't need to exist, and what are the borderlands, what's around them, what are the underdetermined spaces that are created by those boundaries, whether they're false or not, or helpful or not. And so kind of pulling away from the dichotomies to say, if we think about the borderlands as, spaces where people are doing some really interesting work and crossing between open and closed, or crossing between other dichotomies, what could that help inform us about the questions that we ask in open education? And I feel like that was a conversation that we should have more of, that we should kind of think about those opportunities, those borderlands.
No, it's a prime example of watching Twitter and realising you're in the wrong room, actually. I realised
that's beyond not yet. That's wrong roomness.
That's so like trying to split yourself into two.
There was something amazing going on in a different room.
Viv, I can't hear you very well for some reason. Is it just me?
Might be the aircon.
We're laughing too much.
Yeah, sorry. I think these are absolutely vital questions, aren't they? We do pigeonhole ourselves and we think we're one thing or another. I like the term open education in terms of thinking about it as a pick and mix. We're all delving in and out, doing different things, isn't it? But it's the sum of all of that that's the important part. And I think what I get a feel for at the conference is the segregation of the communities. So you're in a resource camp, you're in a MOOC camp, although there's not much MOOCs going on here, but you're in a book camp. But I think if we're going to go forward as a community in times of financial hardship, etc., I think it's really important we know what those boundaries are and blow them up, because we're not going to move forward. And that's really apparent in the UK too. You have this open education resource sort of camp and the MOOC camp, and the two just don't mix, even at conferences.
And also, and as always, through from the different areas of education as well. I mean, always. That's the strop that it just blows me away. The different. Sorry, I'll go on camera. It just blows me away the differences between. The differences between the way in which higher education talk to each other, and then you go into a room and there was a wonderful presentation by an ex-teacher yesterday who just brought it back down, sort of grounded it all again. And so I think that's another boundary which sometimes gets lost in all this.
Can I ask a question? Because I think the part where we were all laughing, was it about that the Twitter stream was slightly different from what was happening at the conference? Is that what you guys were talking about? And then we're talking about this segregation of where, it's like the people who are more on the edges of open pedagogy feeling like they're very distant from the people who are talking about OER and textbook. Is that, because we were sort of chatting about that before you guys came in. Everybody's looking the other way. It's like,
no, I was just saying I was in the wrong room actually, because on Twitter I realised there was an immense presentation going on somewhere else, and I couldn't get there. That's why we were laughing.
But just to kind of add an interesting point, a lot of our presentation, Jen and I completely revamped our presentation overnight because we had been watching the Twitter stream over the last couple of days and seeing it almost like as it was an escape valve. Like people were going to sessions and we're hearing amazing projects and stories and things like that. But then on Twitter we're kind of saying, I really want to talk about this question I'm grappling with, or why are we focused on this, or why aren't we really addressing this issue? And Twitter kind of became this escape valve for those questions and those frustrations. And so one of the things that we wanted to do in our talk is to kind of bring those forward and say, can we make space for these kinds of conversations, not just on back channels, but also at the forefront of our conversations at conferences.
Pretty
Well, I
remarkable.
love that not-yetness of the presentation itself, that the presentation was not yet ready. Like you would respond. Like the nice thing about not-yetness is that you were more responsive than something that's pretty established, right?
But whenever you had that opportunity to actually re-tailor your presentation based upon the conversations.
That's right. That's
It's
right.
usually like you package this thing up before you come.
Yeah. If only we were that
Yeah, you did.
We did, and we just then we redid
It's true. We actually put this entirety on Monday to a different audience.
But it was totally different.
And it was totally different because it was shaped entirely by the conversations of this week, which is a great thing to have happen, but it was also really stressful.
And ultimately, isn't that what open education, open teaching is all about too, is going with that, the needs of the students, the needs of the audience in mind?
Well, actually, it makes me think about the structure of the conference and the way that we weren't asked for a set of slides to be submitted, a week in advance. We were using Google Slides, which meant that we could be updating things right at the last minute. We were working in a shared space. So the infrastructures and the structures of this conference and our choices actually made it more possible for us to do that than I think it would have been otherwise. And I think that relates to some of the stuff that I've been interested in thinking about, which is about the materiality of our educational practices and how that affects the ways in which we can be open and not open and the boundaries between those two.
So can I ask a question about that? And this is really, I think, for Amy and Jen. I'm curious when you talk about not-yetness and liminal spaces and in the library world, threshold concepts and all these things that can't really be assessed or be determined or predetermined at the start of a class, and this other pressure of having to have all these learning outcomes established and these things measured against as you're going through the class. Have you seen any pushback in this concept of not-yetness on the part of assessment, all the sort of standards that get put in front of you when you're teaching?
I'll just say quickly, because I know you have a lot of good stuff here, but I'll just say absolutely. Anytime I talk about not-yetness, we inevitably have the person who raises their hand at the end of it and says, what about accreditation or tenure? Those are the two things that I always get as responses.
That didn't actually happen today.
It didn't happen today. I'm so glad it didn't happen today, because absolutely that is an automatic tension people feel with the concept of not-yetness. But Jen wrote a paper about kind of thinking differently about the way in which we can understand outcomes through measurement. So
did I? Yeah, well that.
Don't worry, you don't have to link it. Later.
Yeah, that paper. Thanks for mentioning that paper.
You're welcome.
That is a paper in progress about more about speculative methods in digital education. But I read something this week, and I cannot remember what the phrase was, but there was a really excellent phrase that was about like consequential assessment, like assessment that actually makes a difference in the world.
Non-disposable.
Non-disposable assessment. It was in a session, but I think it was a quote from somewhere. And again, I know nothing about it, but somebody find out what it is and tell me, because I want to find it again. But to me, there's a sort of, we do a lot of stuff on the MSc in digital education that I would consider to be open-ended, and yet we assess it. And I think that's because if you create assessment criteria, we've been able to create assessment criteria that actually allow for people to make some choices about how they're going to approach tasks and assignments. And I guess that's not so possible everywhere. So I kind of understand that there's some potential issues there that I probably don't completely understand. But it seems to me that the assessment is more interesting than people make it out to be.
I also want to make an observation that Laura had a presentation where she looked at. Okay, good. Is that where you're going to do Maha? Okay. So, do you want to talk a little bit about that too?
Yeah, tell us more about that.
Yeah. Yes. Hello, Laura.
Well, so my presentation a couple days ago was about looking at specific aspects of digital writing, either in the form of blogging or in tweeting is the one that I do my work in, but microblogging or whatever. Are there certain unique digital aspects that can be used to look at whether or not students are connecting ideas, connecting to people? And I call them annotations, which is my summary word for like hyperlinks and mentions and hashtags and retweets and that sort of thing. So I've started looking at how students use those annotation systems to make connections so that we can bring it to the forefront of our conversations with students to have a conversation about how they're directing their communications and targeting their message and amplifying it. And it just becomes a very concrete, I think, easier way to talk to students about how they're being intentional or not being intentional about their communications.
Mm-hmm. It was a really good presentation.
It was. And I do think it does beg us to kind of ask, what are the different kinds of assessments that are not the standard kinds, like intentionality and some of the other metrics you had were really helpful to think about. I was thinking about in terms of my work, and I was like, how would I assess some of my professional work within those frameworks?
Yeah. So. Well, hyperlinks in particular are really interesting, and to look at a blog post that first you just read and you're like, wow, that's a great blog post. I mean, I think we can all do that. Right. But then to sit back and look at how they used hyperlinks and to map it out and see what exactly they were doing, it's really special. Yeah. And so it gets down to, in essence, I think, I mean, obviously more research needs to be done, but I feel like you can map ideas and how people are moving through their argument or their narrative through the hyperlinks and how they choose to hyperlinks. I mean, not even just the types and the sources of the hyperlinks. I mean, obviously that's important, but how they chose to use those. Are they describing? Are they using examples? Are they connecting it to past experience? Are they connecting it to someone else's blog post? Are they connecting it to the course website? Because it tells a story unto itself.
The other thing I would add too, if people have a chance to, I don't know if it'll be periscoped or not, or it'll be on DS 106 radio or something, but Mike Caulfield's going to be talking a little bit after lunch today about federated wiki, but he's done something with it, which is to put it into kind of a more WordPress framework. And what I think it does is it kind of brings, again, to the forefront these questions about annotation and linking and how you kind of build your understanding of something through connections, but then also through your own reflections about your work. And I think it's really powerful stuff. And it shows, I think, what Jen was saying about how we oftentimes do things like assess our own work or do certain things in our classrooms because the tools kind of dictate what those things end up being. And what we need to be talking about instead is, can we better understand what we're trying to do so that we can make the tools work to our advantage rather than just fitting into the mold of those tools. And that's what Mike has really done with FedWiki, I think.
Now I don't know what session to go to at one.
You gotta go. It's a good afternoon.
Yeah. Just wondered if other colleagues have presented yet and what your work is about?
Yeah, I didn't present this time, but one of the just kind of things that I've been thinking about also while listening to both your presentations too was in thinking about the larger context of open ed, like are a lot of the tensions a result of just kind of the maturation process of where the field is at now, especially with the policy, and you're starting to see a lot more infrastructure, and it starts to get institutionalized. And so just thinking about that, I guess for those who've been working in it for quite a while, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that was coming out on Twitter, wasn't it? Almost the hijacking and almost there's two conversations going on. I think in a lot of the presentations, it's just focused on the content and the things that you can measure, and the education. Right. It's evolving in terms of what you can measure. I don't know what it is in the UK anyway. But what you're losing is the nuances of the practice, and you could tell on Twitter that there was almost a different conversation going on in those areas. So.
I guess some of the insight I've been seeing, just the whole barrier and boundary notion was just kind of like flipped the switch, I think, in my head, just kind of recognizing how these kind of barriers constructed of different things, whether it's fear or policy or something, but that's that border band. And I think Amy and Jen had a brilliant picture of like the Mexico-U.S. border with kind of this fence going into the water to a certain point, but we play in that area of water which doesn't really respect that boundary that much, and it kind of travels back and forth on each side. It ends up, it can be still, it can be turbulent. two different things.
So fish don't care.
Nice. Can't read.
Just gave me chills, huh?
Yeah, that was nice. That was nice.
Yeah, and I think I also want to reiterate that I think these borders and boundaries are not. We can't just by force of will decide we're not having those anymore.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm not totally sure that we want that. I think we need to work within those kind of productive tensions that are thrown up by our discussions around whatever it is we're interested in discussing, which at the moment is openness and closure. That we don't assume that anything that kind of interrupts that is a problem. I don't think it's a problem anyway. I think it's an opportunity to
Create.
Be
creative, isn't it?
To be creative and also to revisit our assumptions over and over again, which is what I think we should try to do.
Yeah.
Can
I just want you're presenting this afternoon. So
At the graveyard.
we have not.
You're the closer.
You're the closer.
No,
You're making the plenary.
Everything's a warm up, man.
What do you? What?
One of the things that came out of my research, so I've gone back to my old institution and reviewed the 5 years or so of open education work I did, and that's actually been fascinating. So what sustained and what was vulnerable, so I kind of thought around that. And it's been amazing, actually, quite an emotional experience. And you never, there's the beauty of research is that you don't know what's going to jump out. And one of the things that did jump out, and I'll talk about later, is this idea that you've suddenly got staff and students, wanting to operate in this digital space, but the infrastructure of the institution doesn't enable you to do that. So it's not. I was thinking it's a tension. It's not. It's war. It's a battle going on. And to do the work that you want to do, you're increasingly doing it beyond your institution. I mean, the reason I'm here is because stuff I do on my kitchen table, and actually that's quite dangerous. And
why is it dangerous?
It's dangerous because it's not changing cultures and changing institutions, and I think that's the biggest challenge, isn't it? And we've got all the policy ideas and the levers, and actually cost isn't a lever where I am, and we don't have the textbook, so it's actually how do you get your teeth into your institution to actually to demonstrate this stuff is so important, and we're 15 years behind the curve, when they're just
they're 15 years behind.
Yeah, because you just can't find that.
Because that is the culture. I mean, you're talking about exactly what the culture is, which is that people are doing it on their kitchen tables or wherever they can find space to do it, and that is exactly in the borderland that perhaps that you're also talking about
as well. I mean, we are our institutions. I mean, I think that stuff that happens outside the boundaries of the physical campus, for example, is still. We're still part of that institution and doing things. So it's just that it doesn't happen very fast and it's frustrating. It's not that it doesn't count. I think it does because the institution isn't really anything. It's kind of made up of all the people who.
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? And I think, from my perspective, because I've had nothing back from my institution, I think I don't want you to have this stuff yet, or you almost don't deserve it. So it's quite a personal relationship, isn't it? Yes, I think you're right.
No, I think you're right as well.
You're more right.
No, you're more right. You're righter.
Are they still?
Are you all still awake there? Because we know that you're on totally different time zones.
I'm gonna jump in, and this whole metaphor from the borderlands, and just that notion of where are we situated? What's the context that we're working in? And yeah, I work from the kitchen table, but how do we build the connections and kind of break down the borders that are between those, from your experiences?
I was like, I don't know.
Somebody, conferences, virtually connecting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Everyone's like,
That was a loaded question.
it's just so difficult. And at the conference there's been a lot of talk about things happening through networks of champions, and that's great. But I still think I haven't got the answers in my mind how you can actually transform a culture within an organisation. I thought I did it at my last place. We had an open policy. It was part of strategy, and library were involved in trade. We had everything mapped out, but actually 3 or 4 years down the line, that's just all crumbled away. But you still have staff and students doing this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have sort of the shell of the institution protecting you anymore, because their values and politics and strategies have gone elsewhere. It's a tough one, isn't it? How do you join up these networks to actually create something?
Since I started thinking about federated wikis and doing my head in over that, and then I was listening to Moodle Share yesterday talking about what he was doing in Minnesota for K-12 using Moodle and GApps, and I'd also dived into the WordPress annotation thing, although I haven't actually managed to get the add-on yet. And then I was thinking about analytics and tracking this stuff, and that exactly what you're saying is if one was able to quietly be able to find a way to track all of these things, all of these platforms that are presenting open education resources to users, to be able to find a way of tracking those between wherever they go. And then I got into really dangerous territory, because then I was going to go on to Moodle.org and talk about putting in some code that would enable us to track that, and then I got into really deep water with myself ethically. So that's where I am at the moment. Thank you very much. Deep water. I need Chris Gilford here to kind of go, no, you can't do that.
Well, I'll ask a question. I think it was, is Viv, are you Viv? Viv, which one is Viv? Yes. You talked about being able to transform your culture, so we're not there yet. Davidson College does not have an open policy. We've not figured this out. I'm curious if you have any advice for an institution like ours, small, private, liberal arts. What was your strategy in getting your institution to embrace open educational resources?
My strategy. Revolution, I think, and I think you start at the ground. So you get students and staff involved, and suddenly you build this momentum. Then you lobby and you influence your vice chancellors and those people sitting at the top, and you can change things. The problems I encountered was I used to get through vice chancellors. I'd bend the ear of one, and then they'd leave. So at my last institution, I got through 3, and now I've got through 2 at my present institution. And that's part of the trouble, isn't it? You lose traction.
What happened to them exactly?
You have a secret.
I scare them off.
Where are the bodies?
It makes it very difficult, doesn't it? Because you are and you're taking 3 steps back all the time. But I think you've got to regroup and just keep being as persistent as you can. But great presentations this morning about the BC campus and the amazing stuff that they've achieved. But it's identifying the right stakeholders, isn't it? And the people that you can grab for coffee to go and influence. And I think it's been a lot more strategic about who you talk to as well. So to just carry on building capacity.
Yeah, so you would attribute it more to an influential actor, or would you contribute it more to a particular message that for some reason resonates with your culture?
Well, both. I think both. And you've got to have the champions, although I've got particular thoughts about that, but it's linking it in with your institutional strategy and what their goals are. So if your goals around widening participation is, hey, well, you've got open education, that can do that. Or if the goals around internationalisation, it's like, hey, open education. It's just dressing up in different ways. But but not losing the opportunity to, if you've got a conversation, be more prepared. And I think, I just let my mouth run off, and I really could do with the arguments, more concrete arguments, to, for when I go into those situations as well.
It feels like community engaged research, honestly. When I hear people talking about making these changes and having both the message that resonates with your institution, but also finding the actors and the stakeholders and then working together to promote change. I think we may have a lot to learn from the community engaged research literature. Agree, as a place to go. I agree. Yep.
Okay, guys, you may have worked out that the schedule here is crazy, and we're running from room to room. I was lucky enough to stay in the same room all morning this morning. It was insane, but I don't know. I'm getting the itchy feel from the room here at the moment because it's 1 o'clock.
It's federated wiki time.
And it's federated wiki time.
Okay.
We swear we promise, don't we?
Say hi to Mike.
We all promise that we're going to tweet like mad from it.
Perfect.
Okay, we all promise, but thank you very much. Sorry.
Thank you all for joining.
Everybody.
What a nice collection.
They're running out of the room. Look.
Bye. Bye. You can tell there's a good talk coming up when that happens.
Really, it's like
bye. Take your laptop. Go.
We're going now.
We're going to stay and chat once you're gone.
Thank you so much. It was a really, really good half hour.
Bye.
Oh, wow.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Okay. So,
Oh my, wow.
Okay.
Sorry, Penny, say it again.
You're muted and we're still online. We're still live. So
Okay.
we can't hear what you just said.
That was the quickest way.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think you guys, let's go offline then.
Okay,
and,
we'll, yeah, stopping.